To understand how strange this Camino is, look at this.
This is Camino Francés, around 785 kilometers long, and its highest peak is 1,505 meters high.
The Cruz de Ferro, but, excuse-moi, this is Camino Gran Canaria, 66 kilometers. But in those 66 kilometers, we have the climb around 3,000 meters. So imagine taking the beauty, the intensity, and the quiet miracle of Camino Francés and squeezing it into just a few days. That's the Camino Gran Canaria.
We've walked this route several times. We actually live here in the Canary Islands, and we've guided pilgrims through it step by step.
So in this video, we want to show you how to actually plan it, prepare it, and walk it without underestimating, because this Camino can be one of the most beautiful winter Caminos out there.
But only if you arrive ready.
The first mistake people make with the Camino de Gran Canaria happens before they even arrive. They look at the distance, around 66 kilometers, and the brain says, oh, that's manageable. But this Camino is not difficult because it is long. It's difficult because it's compact. In just a few days you get heat, exposure, long climbs, steep descents, mountain weather, and very little room for bad planning. So the real question is not, can I walk 66 kilometers? The real question is, can I walk 66 kilometers on the island that keeps changing the rules? Because this Camino is short in distance, but not short in effort. The classic way to walk it is usually in 3 stages. Day 1 from Maspalomas to Tunte, Day 2 from Tunte to Cruz de Tejeda, and Day 3 from Cruz de Tejeda to Galdar. And on paper that looks beautifully simple, almost suspiciously simple. Which is exactly the problem, because each of these 3 days has its own personality, and not always the kind of personality you want sitting next to you at dinner. Day 1 from Maspalomas to Tunte is the day that teaches you respect. The classic version is around 28 kilometers, but the distance is not the real problem. The real problem is the heat, the exposure, the lack of shade, and the fact that the climbing keeps arriving like unpaid bill. You start at the south of Gran Canaria with the first stop in the lighthouse. There the island feels dry, open, sunny, and almost holiday-like. And then slowly, step by step, it starts reminding you. This is not the beach walk, my friend. This is why we often prefer breaking this stage into 2. Not because people are weak, because if you empty yourself on the day 1, the island has still 2 more days to have opinions about your knees. And this is one of the biggest lessons of Camino Gran Canaria. The goal is not to prove how tough you are on the first day. The goal is to arrive with enough energy to still enjoy the route. Because if you only survive it, you miss the half of it. Day 2 from Tunte to Cruz de Tejeda is shorter. And this is where many pilgrims relax. Bad idea. Because this is basically climbing day. At around 16-17 kilometers it sounds modest, almost cute, but when you remember that you are gaining roughly 1,000 meters of ascent, it becomes one of those stages where the numbers looks kind. And the body strongly disagrees. This is the day when Gran Canaria starts showing its mountain heart. You leave behind the idea of the sunny island Camino and enter something much bigger. The ravines open, the villages become smaller, the views become wider. And if the weather is clear, you begin to understand why people fall in love with this route. Not because it's easy, but because it makes you feel like you have earned the view. And then comes the day 3, Cruz de Tejeda to Galdar. The dangerous word here is downhill, because downhill sounds easy when you are sitting at home with coffee. Downhill sounds like the gravity is finally helping. But after 2 demanding days, around 22 kilometers with a long, serious descent can be brutal on your knees, quads, hips and feet. This is the trap of the 3rd day. You think that the climbing is over, so the hard part must be finished, but the Camino is not just hard because it climbs. It is hard because it climbs hard and then it makes you pay on the way down. The final descent towards Galdar is beautiful, but it's not passive. You are still working, your legs are still negotiating, your knees might start writing the complaint letters, and this is why the Camino belongs in the much tougher category than the mileage suggests. So can you do a Camino Gran Canaria in 3 days? Yes. Should everyone do it in 3 days? Absolutely not. If you are fit, used to climbs and descents, comfortable walking in heat and happy with long physical days, 3 days can work. But many pilgrims, 4 days is the smarter version. Not the less brave version, the smarter version. Because we break in the first stage usually around Arteara or Fataga area to reduce the heat exposure, protect the legs and arrive with enough energy to actually enjoy where you are. And this matters, because this Camino is too beautiful to experience only as a survival exercise. When we guided our group through this route, this became very clear. The Camino de Gran Canaria is not the race to Galdar, it's a crossing. And if you create a better rhythm, the island has time to reveal itself. Because once you understand the numbers, the more interesting question is, what is this Camino really about? And the answer is not just a hard route across the islands. The Camino de Gran Canaria is about crossing Gran Canaria itself, and maybe it's also about crossing oneself. You begin in a hot, dry south. You rise in plains, volcanic landscapes, pine forests, the mountain villages, and then you descend towards Galdar, one of the deepest historical hearts of the islands. So in only a few days you are not just crossing distance, you're crossing climates, you're crossing landscapes, you are crossing centuries. And this is the part people miss when they only look at the elevation profile. There are layers to this Camino. The first is the island itself. The Gran Canaria is often sold as beaches, resorts, sun and holidays, and yes, that exists. But when you walk this route, you meet another island, a rougher island, a quieter island, an island of ravines, stone paths, wind, silence, and the villages that feel very far from the tourist postcards. The second layer is the Jacobean one. This route connects places linked in the Santiago tradition on the islands, especially Tunte and Galdar. It has its own credential, its own stamps, and its own local pilgrimage recognition. So yes, this is not the Camino Frances, it is not the Camino Portuguese, and definitely is not Camino del Norte, but is real pilgrimage route with its own history and identity. And then there is a third layer, the older one, because some of these paths were used long before modern pilgrims arrived here. These were island routes, communication routes, paths used by people moving across the difficult landscapes because the island itself demanded movement, adaptation and respect. Near the first part of the route we have places like the Arteara necropolis, one of the most important archaeological sites of the island. And at the end in Galda, you are close to the Cueva Pintada, one of the most important archaeological and historical sites in Gran Canaria. So this Camino is not just hard, it's layered. And you're not only walking across the island, you're walking through its memory, and this is why it stays with people. Not only because of the views, not only because of this effort, but because by the time you reach the end, you feel like you've crossed several worlds in just a few days. Now let's talk about the practical sides. The first, accommodation. This is where you need to leave your mainland Camino brain at the airport. This is not the Camino Frances, where every few kilometers you find another pilgrim village, another albergue, another bar, another bed. On the Camino Gran Canaria, accommodation is the part of the strategy. You are usually looking at hotels, guest house, rural houses, and mountain accommodation. That means two things. First, it can be more expensive than the classic budget mainland Camino. And the second, you should not improvise too much. Especially if you are walking in the busiest seasons, splitting stages or trying to stay in specific places. The usual key points are Maspalomas on the south, where most people begin, the Arteara of Fataga area if you decide to split the first stage, Tunte, which is the natural key stop on the route, Cruz do Tejeda, the mountain stop before the final descent, and Galdar, the historic finish where we really recommend staying at least one night if you can. Because after the final descent you probably don't want to immediately run away to the airport. On this Camino, the accommodation is not just where you sleep, it is how you recover. And recovery matters here a lot. Now food and water. This route is not the place to freestyle badly. On some Caminos, if you forget something, you just stop in the next bar. On this route, especially in the exposed southern section, that attitude can become a problem. Eat before you are empty. Drink before you are desperate. Carry more water than in the mainland Camino brains thinks it's reasonable. And if heat affects you, bring electrolytes. Because the sun here is not theoretical. Especially on the southern half of the route, hidden exposures are part of the Camino's identity. So check your stages, check where your services are, and do not assume there will always be a cafe exactly when your soul needs a tortilla. Now, what should you take? For packing, think light, protective and honest. You need serious sun protection, a hat, sunglasses, sunscreen. You need enough water capacity, you need shoes that can handle rocks, heat and long descents, and you need a blister care. You probably want trekking poles, especially if your knees start to complain already. And you need a layer for the mountain section because Gran Canaria can go from Holiday Island to where did this cold wind came from. So yes, prepare for the sun, but do not prepare only for sun. What you do not need is a backpack full of just-in-case nonsense. This island charges extra for every unnecessary gram. So go light, pack smart, and remember, the shorter the Camino, easier it's to think you can carry more. How much does it cost? Here is another surprise. This Camino is short, but it's not necessarily cheap. Because you are not relying on the dense network of budget pilgrims albergues. Accommodations can be higher. Food depends on how simply you eat, transport depends on how you connect the start and finish, and extras like museums, archaeological visit, luggage transfer, and extra nights before and after can add up. So do not plan it's like a 3-day budget Camino Frances. Plan it like a short mountain pilgrimage on a holiday island. It does not mean it has to be luxury, it does not mean it has to be crazy expensive, but it does mean you should plan realistically. And this is a shorter Camino, but not necessarily a cheap Camino. Now, who is this Camino really for? It is for you if you want a shorter Camino that still feels like a real adventure. It is for you if you love mountains, dramatic views, warmer winter light, silence and the feeling of crossing the whole landscapes with your body. It is for you if you do not have 5 weeks for the Camino Frances, but you still want something that feels powerful, meaningful and complete. It is for you if you want the winter Camino where you have a real chance of sun, incredible views and a completely different Camino experience. But it might not be for you if you want flat walking. It might not be for you if you want frequent cafes. It might not be for you if you want easy albergue logistics. It might not be the best choice if you want a very gentle first Camino where everything is simple and predictable. This Camino is beautiful, but it is not soft. And this is exactly why some people love it. So if we had to name the biggest mistakes people make on the Camino de Gran Canaria, they would be this. First, judging the route only by kilometers. Second, starting too late on hot days. Third, carrying too much. Fourth, treating downhill as rest. And the fifth, not booking accommodation carefully enough. 6, not carrying enough water. And 7, rushing so much that you reach Galda with destroyed legs and no emotional space left to feel what you just walked through. But finishing is not the only goal. Arriving well matters too, and this is something we really believe. The Camino is not only about reaching the end, it is about what kind of person arrives there. Exhausted and empty, or tired, yes, but open, present, aware of what just happened. Because this route can give you a lot. Sun, silence, beauty, effort, views that makes everyone suddenly stop talking.
And moments where the group or the person beside you or the landscape itself becomes part of the pilgrimage.
And this is exactly why we created our Gran Canaria walk-in retreat around this Camino. Because, yes, you can walk it independently, and if that's your path, beautiful. But we also see how different this route becomes when the logistics are held, the rhythm is calmer, and we are walking with a smaller group of people who are not just trying to reach the next hotel, but actually experience what the island is opening in them.
We've just guided a group through this route, and once again it reminded us why this Camino is so special. The climbs were really hard, the views were spectacular, but the conversations became deeper day by day.
And by the time we reached the end, it was clear that this was not just a sunny winter walking holidays. It was a real Camino. So if you feel called to walk the Camino Gran Canaria with us, we are opening the next edition of our Gran Canaria walking retreat. You will find the details below. But if you want to walk it independently,
Take a moment to ask the right questions. We created a free Camino Gran Canaria reality check to help you understand if this route fits your body, your expectations, and the kind of Camino you're looking for. The link is below, and we will send it straight to your inbox.
either way, prepare well, because the Camino de Gran Canaria is short, but not small. And if you want to see how we did this Camino last year with our friends,
Watch it.
watch this one here.